Well, hello everybody out there and welcome to another random video. So in today's video I want to explain to you how to exactly digitize your records. I know there are a lot of videos about it out there, but in this video I just want to focus a little bit more on technical difficulties and frequency range or sampling rate. So what do you need in order to digitize your records? Well, of course you need a record player and a phono preamp, unless your record player already has a built-in phono preamp. And then you need a device to record the sound coming from the preamp. So you can use either your computer with an analog line in, or you can also use a linear PCM recorder. Now the question is, what can you do if you don't have a PCM recorder, but you have one of those new Mac computers that don't even have an analog line in anymore? Well, in this case, the only thing that you can do is trying to get a phono preamp with a built-in analog to digital converter. So those preamps usually have a USB output, and then you can go into the USB port of your computer. So that being said, when it comes to PCM recorders, you have to be careful because there are quite a lot of PCM recorders out there that can't really handle the signal that is coming from the phono preamp. So the signal is kind of too hot or too strong. So the internal hardware of the PCM recorder can't really handle it. So using the rack level control doesn't really help to avoid the problem. It doesn't help to make the music less distorted in a way. So I already talked about a similar problem when it comes to my sampler, the Roland SP404. I made a video about the clipping problem and that you cannot avoid clipping by using the rack level control, and that is basically kind of a similar problem. I used to have the Zoom H1 PCM recorder, and it could not handle the signal coming from my phono preamp. It would always sound distorted no matter how low I had the rack level. But now I'm using the Olympus LS5 and it works totally fine. I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that the Olympus LS5 has two separate inputs, one for microphone and one for line in, but the Zoom H1 had one input for both of them. So one input for the microphone and line in. Maybe that was the problem, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, this is something that you have to look out for. So now let's talk about the frequency range or the sampling rate. So when it comes to the sampling rate, you need to know about one very interesting thing, which is the Nyquist-Shannon sampling theorem. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So it basically means that in order to recreate a certain frequency, you have to sample it at twice that frequency, kind of, or more than twice that frequency. So that's kind of like the basic gist of it. So just keep that in mind for now. So some people still believe that vinyl is infinite when it comes to sound. They think, oh, vinyl contains the pure analog sound, like the uncompressed waveform or whatever, and analog sound is infinite, and therefore you need a ridiculously high sampling rate in order to capture all that sound. Well, that's not really true. First of all, most modern day records come from a totally digital master. So yeah, you're basically purchasing digital sound on an analog format. And yeah, even if analog records that were made from an analog master, even if they would be quote unquote infinite in sound, which they aren't, there are still limitations. And one of the most important limitations are the technical specs of the devices that you are using to play that record. And I think probably the most important one are the technical specs of your cartridge, the thing that is mounted to your tone arm. And that's exactly what you have to know. So for example, I'm using the Shure V15 Type 3 cartridge, and looking at the technical specs, we can see that it has a frequency range of 20 Hz to 20 kHz. Now, knowing what we know now about the Nyquist-Shannon sampling theorem, you will probably realize that it only makes sense to use a sampling rate of 44.1 kilohertz. That's the only thing that makes sense, because everything above 44.1 kilohertz doesn't really make any sense, because it wouldn't increase the sound quality, because the record player or the cartridge can't deliver more sound quality. So, or to put it in other words, only because you're making your garage bigger doesn't mean that your car is getting bigger too. So that's kind of like the same thing. So a frequency or sampling rate higher than 44.1 kilohertz, so for example 48 kilohertz, would probably only make sense if you have a cartridge capable of a frequency range up to, let's say, 23, 24 kilohertz, something like that. I don't even know what the highest frequency range is that a cartridge can achieve. But yeah, that would probably be the only reason why you should use 48 kilohertz instead of 44.1. But with a cartridge like mine that has a frequency range up to 20 kilohertz, 44.1 kilohertz is more than enough, or is basically exactly right. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to tell you, that you don't need ridiculously high sampling rates in order to have an accurate or a good digitization of your record. Basically, it would only result in a bigger sound file, but you wouldn't achieve anything. When it comes to the bits, of course, 24-bit is definitely better than 16-bit. So yeah, 16-bit wouldn't be, well, you can use it, but I wouldn't really recommend it. So 24-bit and 44.1 kilohertz would be enough for most of the cartridges, and therefore to digitize your records. So I hope that video was helpful and informative. Thanks for watching, and I see you in the next video. Bye.